Welcome to the Vortex Nation podcast, brought to you by lovers of hunting, shooting, public lands, the Second Amendment, and good food. All right, picture this. It's the middle of winter. There's snow outside. You probably have a cold like I do, and you like shooting. But, now you can go shooting out in the snow. We're not saying that it's impossible to go shooting out in the snow, but a lot of times you get up and it's dark out. You go to work, and that's when it's actually light out. And then when you're done with work, it's dark out again. At least that's how it is in Wisconsin. I know that for a fact. So it's tough to go out and go shooting as much as you would ordinarily get to in the summer or the spring and parts of the fall, too. So we were talking about this a little bit. Actually, we've talked about it. I think Scott briefly brought it up. Scott Parks brought it up. I've talked about it here, and Mark and I have talked about it here with Ruben and Adam, who join us today. Actually, Adam, we're going to have you introduce yourself, too. But basically, we're going to talk about what you can do to stay sharp on your shooting skills when it's the winter so you don't come out in the spring shooting like I do, which is basically terrible. And, just basically staying sharp. Maybe even coming out of the winter a better shooter. Who knows? But first off, like we said, you've all met Ruben before. Adam, you have been on, you've been on, many podcasts in the past, but this is your first time on this podcast. So for our listeners, how about a quick intro?
Well, yeah, first time on the Thunderdome, so I am a member of the consumer sales team here at Vortex Optics, and then in my personal life, I'm also a three-gun shooter. I've shot at the pro level for a few years and been a match director and things like that for years before that. So been very active in the action shooting scene, both in three-gun, USPSA, and IDPA for several years.
And tactical shotgun.
Oh yeah, did the tactical shotgun thing too when it was cool.
Definitely.
It's not cool anymore?
Yeah, that's a whole nother story.
Ooh.
Sounds
like another podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe. Who knows?
Write that down.
So Ruben and Adam are both very experienced shooters, very good shooters. I think both of them are too humble to ever let you know it. But they are very good shooters, and I know that they do a lot of shooting year-round. What are your guys' thoughts, first off, on, just the idea of, staying sharp in the winter? I mean, for you guys, is it even something you consciously think of, or is it actually, it seemed to me like a worthwhile topic to talk about? But
well, yeah. I mean, is there an off-season for you guys?
Well, up here in the Great White North, up north, we don't have the shoot year-round ability as much as our southern compadres do. Right?
Yeah, some people in Arizona and Texas are probably like, what the hell are they talking about right now?
Yeah, so it's different based on your location in the country and in the world. But really, if you're anywhere north of Kansas, any of the guys in the Northeast, any of the guys in the Northwest, like you understand that once October, November rolls around, getting outside and doing the stuff that we do all summer becomes a lot more difficult. And it's not like we're all judged on a different scale. It's not like we shoot different matches than the guys down south. But we have that time where we have to drastically change everything we do because those guys and girls are getting to shoot year round, right? And so, yeah, it is important. And when you say stay sharp, it's interesting because there's a lot of ways to look at that. Like, I know that when we're limited by weather, we actually get to do some of the things that people down south never do, right? So the joke is like dry fire. What's dry fire? Like our friends in Texas will say that. And
they don't know what that is.
And dry fire is one of those essential parts of staying sharp, whether it be hunting, competitive shooting, self-defense. You need to know your gun, your grip, your trigger. You're able to focus on your stance, all of that stuff. And so in a way, like we're actually advancing certain skills or refreshing certain skills. But there is that aspect of we don't get to be on the clock as much as our friends down south do.
Right.
You guys get to dance in the mirror more before you go to the club.
Yep.
That's a great way of putting it, Mark.
Got it.
Thanks for bringing that up. Now, dry firing you bring up first. Actually, that's even the first thing I had on my list here. Dry firing. Now, it's something to be taken seriously. It's not just what people do when they get a brand new gun. They start kind of, we call it around here, I don't even know if I can say this on the podcast, finger banging.
There you go.
I said it.
You did.
When you're sick, you lose your filter. I'm going to say that.
It fell right out.
It does. So dry firing, it is something to be taken seriously now. That's kind of what you guys are saying. And we should note, too, we're talking to 2 3-gunners here, but I think this also applies to long-range shooters, too, right? So we'll try and make this all-encompassing. What is it about dry firing that's so important how do you go about doing it properly so you're not just kind of slapping the trigger randomly in your basement? Like what should you be doing when you're actually like training by dry firing?
I think there's two big components to it. If you look at it on a macro scale, basically what we're talking about is being plugged into the interface, right? So you want to be connected to your gun, know what your gun feels like, how you interact with the gun, and then shooting itself is a very visual sport. So you want to maintain or enhance the link between visually what you see and then your hand-eye coordination and what it's doing in the gun. So you want to be familiar with the gun, and then you want the gun linked to what you're visually seeing and connecting those two. And that's what you do through dry fire is connecting those two.
We should also clarify, dry firing is firing the gun without, is it without ammunition, or does it count as dry firing if you have like blanks in
I
there?
think it depends on who you are. Some guys will put a snap cap in the gun and use that because they think it damages the firing pin to dry fire. Others will not use anything in the gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for example, now I don't mean to go too off on a tangent, but what if you're like a rimfire shooter? You're not supposed to dry fire those, right?
Old rimfire firearms, they really recommend it. Like I would say anything older than like 1995, they would say you shouldn't. But, you know,
And why is that?
there's the chamber of a 22 rimfire, right? We'll use that as an example. The extractor actually has to get in really close into the chamber. So there's a cut typically on the right side of the chamber, and it doesn't go into the chamber, but it's right next to it. So it's this little kind of triangular cut that your extractor goes into when you put a round into battery. And when you shoot, that firing pin hits pretty consistently right there, okay? And if you do that without a brass cartridge in the case, that firing pin, which is usually a hardened steel, will hit your barrel, which is also a type of hardened steel, and it can cause a dent in that, and it can deform bullets as you put it into battery. So typically, yeah, it's a good practice to not dry fire a rimfire cartridge.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that. I mean, you always hear that, like, don't dry fire, rim fire. So I've never done it, but I never really asked myself why.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
don't do it.
The metallurgy on the older guns too, and older centerfire guns too, it wasn't good for them just because of the materials they were using at the time and the designs that they were using at the time. That would wear on guns, but everything post 1970, it's pretty safe to dry fire. Centerfire to dry fire pretty much as you want, and you're not going to hurt. Really, all you're doing is putting reps on your springs, which is springs wear out every time they oscillate. So every time a spring cycles, that's what decreases the life of a spring. So you're going to wear out your springs eventually to the tune of 50,000 reps or whatever it is. But other than that, like the macro machine steel parts of the gun, you're not going to hurt them to an appreciable degree.
Okay. And what is it too? Isn't there that thing where it's like every CZ pistol or something like that? Don't they go through like a bazillion dry fires? Or they have like a machine. That, like, dry fires.
It's either 1,000 or 10,000 dry fire cycles, but it's also a slide cycle. So it's dry fires, it cycles the slide, resets the hammer. Dry fires, cycle slide, and they do an extensive. Military Arms Channel just did a video where he was out at the CZ factory and showed their extensive dry fire procedure. But you know what?
Pretty cool.
Their guns are pretty nice when you get them out of the box.
Well, I was going to ask, I mean, you talk about a spring wearing out, but in essence, are you wearing something in a little bit too at the same time?
Oh, yeah. Especially a more, shall we say, economical firearm, that got through the factory. They had a little bit looser tolerances on it. The hand fitting on it wasn't the same that you get on a $5,000 custom-made pistol. I mean, every one of those cycles that wears down the metal a little bit so that the edges are a little bit smoother and things like that. So you're breaking it in to a certain extent.
Oh yeah. So dry firing now, what does that look like when you're in a training situation? I could see potentially two different ways of looking at this. Like I could see there's like I'm gonna get in the zone, I'm gonna get really calm, I'm gonna really focus on how I'm breaking the trigger, all these things. But then I could also see if you're a competitor who's on the clock, also practicing dry firing in a more rushed situation. So what does that look like?
Everybody has a different regimen, right? If you think about somebody who is serious about working out, like they know Thursday is this day, Friday is this day, right? They go to the gym with a plan. Typically, they're working on isolating a certain muscle or a certain skill or something. I would say anybody who shoots and anybody who dry fires is obviously trying to get better at shooting. And so they probably have the same plan. Like if you were to go to the range and say, okay, Tuesday, I'm going to focus on 50-yard pistol single round engagements from my holster on the clock. And so the same goes with dry firing. You're going to have a plan of what you need to work on. Sometimes you work on draws. Sometimes time doesn't matter, but you tell yourself, I'm not going to break the shot until it's a perfect alpha. And sometimes you focus on speed. How fast can I get my first shot off from a draw? So it really depends on what the goal is for that training session. And I would say for people who do dry fire, I'll admit I don't dry fire enough, but if you do dry fire, you're going to have specific goals that you're trying to accomplish in that training session. And sometimes that is speed. Sometimes it's, if you watch a guy like Josh Tarrant or Josh Freilich, you name any of the top competitors out there on the Instagram, right? They're putting up videos of their practice sessions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Josh Tarrant, I've watched a lot of his. He also he goes full bore, like he's got a dump bucket in his basement.
Yeah.
And he like goes around poles and walls in his basement and does all that.
And Josh is a good example of a guy who uses dry fire as a method of practice when other methods aren't necessarily available. So he lives a good driving distance away from his range. And so dry fire is his main practice. He probably does, and I can't speak for you, Josh, but I'm sure he does 5-to-1 dry fire sessions versus range sessions where he's actually live firing.
Do you guys find because you guys shoot a lot of 3-gun, right? So, pistol, AR, shotgun. Do you find that the dry firing practice is more beneficial with one firearm versus the other, or firearm platform versus the other, or is it about the same?
It depends. You're going to work on whatever you need work on.
Yeah.
I'll get to a point where the middle of the year, my pistol's pretty sloppy, and I need to go back to fundamentals, and so, then I'm going to dry fire pistol. My particular rifle is kind of my game. That's something that I take very seriously, and I do it well. So rifle I don't work on as much. Here at work, I get a lot of chances to shoot rifle too, taking customers to the range and stuff. And so every range session is a practice session, really is kind of my thoughts. And so rifle just so happens to be the thing I don't dry fire as much. But yeah, if I get back from a match where I shot offhand plate racks at 100 yards or 50 yards and I didn't shoot them very well, I'm going to dry fire.
Yep.
But one really important to think, and for anybody listening, know that dry fire it's not about learning your trigger pull or your trigger press. It's about seeing your sights and knowing when to break that shot. And so getting the trigger finger in time with your vision, in time with your grip and stance, and then breaking that shot when you know that shot is going to be where it needs to be. And that's the thing, right? If you pull up and draw real fast and you just hip shoot or whatever, it's like you don't know where your sights were. Same goes if you pull up and you draw and you focus on speed only, you really don't know. The dry firing isn't doing you any good, because you could dry fire in a completely black room. If all you needed to do is gain muscle memory on your trigger pull, then it's not doing anything for you. But this is all about seeing your sights and breaking a shot when your sights are where they need to be.
I think there's a micro and a macro aspect to it too. And I think how much of each you do kind of depends on where you're at skill level wise. At the beginning, you have, especially in action shooting, but also with the long range too, you have a lot of skills to learn. You have a lot of equipment to learn, and you're also playing with your setups too. So you're learning how to draw. You're practicing drawing. You're trying a new holster. You're trying a mag pouch position. You need to learn how to smoothly reload without bobbling it, how to mount a rifle and, not catch it in your armpit and things like that. So there's like the macro skills that you're trying to learn. And it's a great way to learn those when you are trying to build skill. And, the elephant in the room is that dry fire is free. It doesn't take ammunition. No matter who you are, ammunition supply is finite. Everybody has a different level of access to it, but nobody has unlimited access that I know of. So it's something you can do for free, and you can work those skills without burning your ammo budget. And then you also get to a point where once you've built those skills, you don't have to put in the same amount of hours to maintain them, but then you can also start to work on the visual interface of seeing the sight, pressing the shot, and then calling for yourself whether that was a good shot or not. And you can start to work on various things as you start to identify weaknesses that you want to improve on. But there's kind of two aspects to it. There's the gross motor skill, if you will, and then there's the really fine stuff too. And you can do a combination of both.
Like Jim, you built the rally car, right?
Yeah.
Your time in the shop building it is huge until it's done, and now it's oil changes, right?
Right.
That's
right.
kind of what we're getting at is you're going to put in time based on what needs to be done. Dry fire, it's not just maintenance, but that's a lot of it is maintaining and building fundamentals.
How do you determine what is a good shot? Like when you say you call, like whether that was a good shot or not. I'm picturing in my head, like I'm a long range guy. I'm looking down the scope. I pull the trigger, and maybe that one's a little bit easier for me to call a good shot because I guess I'm looking through the scope, and I'm not doing like a from low ready or something like that, or from a holster. But like, can you tell, like, okay, I pulled the trigger here. Hopefully my hands didn't move. It looks like the sight was in the right place. Like,
do you ever have it where, Mark, even in hunting, where when you break a shot, you're like, oh, that was a good shot. I know it was.
Oh, I've had those, and then
Yeah.
the reverse of that as well.
Yeah, and that's, I'd say everybody who shoots knows that, and the precision guys know it really well too. Like
you just know.
You just know because of the last image you saw before the gun moved, and it's like that's kind of what we're going off of. We have targets set up. Sometimes in a basement, like my basement isn't real big, so I have reduced size targets in my basement up on the wall, and I know when that hammer or striker fell, I know where that shot was going.
Yep.
And the only difference is that you don't have recoil.
Yep. And that's what I think you guys are touching on, what I was going to ask too. Can dry firing show you things that you wouldn't see otherwise when you're doing live fire?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I incorporated a Mantis X training aid over the last year for my pistol dry fire. And what that is it's a sensor that has a couple of gyros in it that basically, and accelerometers in it, and it clips to the pick rail of your pistol or rifle or shotgun, doesn't matter. And when it senses, it's in a constant recording mode, and then it'll sense when you drop the hammer, okay? And it goes back like a half a second, and it saves the movement that was happening up until that hammer fell. So it's like a video recorder that's on a constant record, and then as soon as something happens, it saves a couple of seconds before. And so what you can do is it links to your phone, and basically when that hammer falls, it shows where your gun moved as soon as you broke the shot.
Interesting.
And so I know that if I'm shooting all 90s, 94s, 95s on my Mantis with my pistol, then it was a good dry fire session because it meant that my grip was good. It meant my stance was good. It meant my trigger press was good, and that I didn't jerk after I shot too. So you can incorporate the aids of like a Mantis into your training regimen to know. Otherwise, you're kind of just going off of gut feeling.
What's the scale on that? So you said like a 94. Like what does that mean? Is that out of 100?
Yeah, it's a system. We could link the Mantis video if we wanted to this podcast too, to the show notes. But yeah, it is out of 100. Like you're basically anything in the 90s means that you hit the 10 ring of the target.
Okay.
And so as you start to move outside of there, you're going to start to lose points.
Do you think there's almost some aspect too of dry firing that's almost it makes you somewhat blissfully unaware of recoil? Like a lot of times people say, and this might be a naive comment or something like that, but when you pull the trigger, you almost want the recoil to surprise you. Like you want to pretend that it's not there so that way you don't flinch or try and counteract the recoil. If you get used to dry firing, does it almost make you forget about the recoil such that it's not a big boogeyman in the back of your head? Does that have anything to do with it? Might be a dumb question, but
I don't think so for me, because I mean, we've shot enough to the point where I don't think anything about the gun surprises us anymore.
Yeah, you should know when the gun's going to go off.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's recoil. You ever see somebody shoot their last shot and then you're like, oh, they're out, and you want to tell them like, hey, you're out, but then you watch them pull the trigger again and the gun goes like this, like dives.
Oh yeah.
Right?
They like jerk forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what's happening there is muscle memory is telling them that when the gun goes off, these are the forces needed to counteract the recoil, right? And so their muscles are firing, right?
Which isn't exactly a bad thing, right?
All right, it happens.
It's not.
It's muscle memory, but now take a guy who shoots a 9 a lot and give him a 40. He's not going to control the recoil as much as he should. And so your goal should be to control recoil, but it should also be to let the gun cycle and to know where it's going to come back rather than really trying to fight it.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Okay.
So that person isn't, well, I feel like I just shouted there. He's not necessarily like flinching or something like
No.
that. He's just
But recoil
kind of
is the
auto
thing
correcting for.
that's hard. You can't really recreate recoil in dry
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah.
Dry fire is usually, I would say, most of it is usually associated with some sort of manipulation. A good example would be a draw. So first shot out of a draw, you can dry fire that, and then you get to a point where as you start to speed up your draw and break the first shot, you can be like, oh, that one was early.
Yeah, too
Or-
fast.
Or, oh, I was there for a long time before I broke it. But you can kind of get to the point where you're looking at the sight, and when the hammer snaps, you're like, where was the sight when that happened? Did I actually see the rear sight? Or did I see the dot, when that hammer fell?
Yeah.
Or didn't it? And that's where you start to build the connection between what the hand's doing and what the eye's doing. So, in pistols, it's draws and reloads. In rifles, it's bolt manipulations or transitions between positions, transitions between guns. Shotguns, it's off of reloads.
Yeah. I got one more question on dry fire. I know we talked a lot about dry firing, but I do think it's a big one. We have tons more to talk about here, but let's say long range guys. Now, Scott Parks is mentioning how dry firing at 100 yards is very nice to be able to do because you can see essentially through the scope what's happening downrange, right? So if you pull the trigger and you notice that you go down and to the right every single time you pull the trigger, that's something you can hopefully see and correct. When you're indoors, I guess, do you guys have any way to,
Pick very small things.
yeah, I was about to say because most people don't have a 100-yard corridor in their house.
Yeah.
But you just pick smaller things.
Reduce
Light
size
switches.
targets, stuff like that.
Shot glasses, corners of cabinets, rooms, picture frames, TVs, the actual corners. I'll do like crisscross drills while I'm watching the TV. I, of course, verified my gun was unloaded and my TV was in front of a cement wall, but I would go corner to corner on a TV while I was watching it. Or if you try to get a draw and snap the hammer at something on a commercial, like a shape on a TV commercial is not on the TV for very long. So if you can present and get a good shot on something that you see, the phone number on the bottom of the screen or something like that, that's how you can start to do that. But it's picking things that are exponentially smaller than the actual target that you're going to shoot at, because then you can pick up on the little things that you're doing. If you just shoot at a full-size IPSC target on your wall, it's not going to tell you a whole lot.
My wife is going to wonder what the hell's going on when she comes home. I'm just shooting at the TV.
Hey, that was like
Me and the dog just hanging out.
4 years ago, man. That was me. The TV watching was directly linked to dry fire.
Perfect.
I think that one other thing too is I'll use dry fire, kind of like Adam mentioned, as a part of something else. So sometimes dry firing is loading my shotgun practice.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes dry firing is a functionality of loading a rifle and of course unloaded, but inserting a magazine and getting back to your sight picture and then break a shot. And so it's like, I don't really care. We can all shoulder a gun really fast, but how fast can you shoulder a gun and break an accurate shot? So that's kind of what we use dry fire as well. And then, a big part of practicing and staying sharp as a competitive shooter is working on your mental game. So like stage planning, stuff like that. And so what I'll do is come out of a draw with a pistol, dry fire at one target, insert a new magazine, and then go to the second target. And so you're kind of, a lot of times in a 3-gun match or a pistol match or whatever, any type of competitive action shooting, you're going to have a stage plan of the order that you shoot targets in. You don't just run out and shoot them as you see them usually, unless it's a blind stage. But you build and reinforce your mental game in dry fire.
Yeah. You kind of went into it too, a little bit of like the practicing transitions and things like that.
Yeah.
Practicing, I'm sure if you've got shotgun on a sling or something like that, a lot of times, and again, we'll bring him up, Josh Tarrant, you watch his Instagram page and he knows what match he's going to, and he knows that at that match you're going to have to carry around everything on a sling, whether it's your rifle or your shotgun. So you see him, goofing around with a sling. He might do more dry firing with a sling that week or that month or whatever time.
Yeah.
Especially sling matches, because they're kind of niche. When we were going to those matches, we would start playing around with slings a lot more when you knew that was coming, and you could also quickly debunk some ideas of how you wanted to carry it that weren't so hot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you look kind of on the tactical side of the world, you see all the kinds of setups people have, all their slings set up, and we would look at it and be like, there's no way. There's really about 3 ways to do it.
I don't want that gun hitting me in the back of the head while I'm running.
Yeah. So I guess then if you're in PRS too, I know that they have to prepare for, as Scott mentioned, shooting PRS or precision rifle out of a helicopter, so you can just rent a helicopter for it to in dry fire out of a helicopter.
Right.
Nick had to build a fort one time, so you can just build forts in your basement. That's good stage planning and dry fire practice.
Exactly.
And just fun.
Yeah. Let's talk about like actual shooting too that you can do, because you can still actually shoot in winter. You're not limited to only dry firing. Now you guys do, and I've seen actually a bunch of guys around the office do pistol leagues and USPSA, right? So that's a U.S. Pistol
United States Practical
Association.
Shooters Association.
Yes.
Yes. That.
was PISA.
So explain. What is it?
Well, if you're fortunate to have an indoor range, an indoor shooting facility, and a local club that is a USPSA or IDPA club or UML club, you might find that on a Tuesday or Wednesday night that they've got some organized shooting going on. We're very very fortunate to have a couple of clubs locally here that do that. And so when we get into the season where our fellow shooters down south and in other areas are getting to shoot outdoors, we're doing it indoors. And we take that opportunity sometimes to focus on other guns. I know Adam will shoot like a single stack gun in the winter. Sometimes I'll shoot, production, which is, kind of an unmodified, off-the-shelf striker-fired pistol. But usually we're using those indoor leagues to focus on skills that are things that go away. The shooting a rifle offhand, we can do that with a PCC now indoors.
Pistol caliber carbine.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So we'll focus on that a little bit. I'll have individual personal goals of things that I need to do and things that I sucked at during the year, which there are plenty of them. So it's usually there's a long list and it's like, well, all right, I'm going to start here. But yeah, you have goals and it's a really good way to get reps in.
And as an enthusiast and also as someone who's been an event promoter, really excites me because it's gotten so much popular. Most areas that have a very active action pistol scene generally have a league going on somewhere. As we've traveled about the country and talked to our other friends who live in other areas. I'm a recent transplant from the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. If you were to rewind 3-4 years ago, there was one indoor league. It was every Thursday night. There was 80 people there. It started at 6. It would run till 9 or 10 o'clock. Because that was the only game in town.
I was going to say, that's a solid commitment.
Yeah, that was, and there was 2 stages. Like, you waited a long time to shoot for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So, but it was cool because, we got some live fire. There weren't very many live fire opportunities, to wear your belt, do some, to get a start on a stage. And then also, everybody was there. Like, all of our, we lived all over town, so it was a big social gathering. So, as that became popular, it grew to the point where other ranges, the popularity of shooting grew too since 2010, but it grew to the point where during the summer up in the Twin Cities, you can shoot USPSA within an hour of the Minneapolis Metro every weekend and 3 to 4 nights a week.
Nice.
During the winter, it got to that point too, that there was pretty much an indoor league. It wasn't just Thursday anymore. You could go to X range on Tuesday night. You could go to Y range on Wednesday night. And it exploded a lot to the point where a lot of folks were starting to say, like, man, the season never really stopped. Especially if you were a pistol shooter, like, the season never really stopped. It just, instead of going to ABC range, you're going to XYZ range instead. So
something I've been pushing and questioning within the shooting sports is one of the things I do at Vortex is work on a lot of the, like, match sponsorships and promotion stuff. And I've always wondered, like, why don't we do the big matches in the South in the winter and the big matches up north in the summer, And, like, it's actually starting to move that way now. You're seeing there's matches in Vegas in January. There's matches in Utah in middle of December. And so it's kind of moving that way because typically, in the winter, we're cold and they're bearable.
Dark.
They're bearable, right?
Yeah, and sunlight.
Oh,
too.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just
We just don't
ridiculous
have
up here.
enough light.
Yeah, they're just.
But, and then in the summer, it's just too dang hot down south. And so it's actually kind of moving that way. So it's nice. Like, we travel for matches anyways. I would rather travel down south in the winter than in the summer.
And would rather, like, not go to the Southwest in June.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds crazy enough to work.
Yeah.
So you brought up PCC. Let's talk about that briefly. That got introduced to USPSA. I don't know enough about it. I didn't even know what
2 years ago?
USPSA stood for about 5 minutes ago. But So what? How does that work then? It's its own like subdivision within USPSA. You can use
Yeah.
PCC.
So USPSA has a bunch of divisions. They've got single stack, they've got limited, limited minor, open, production, carry optics, and revolver. And so PCCs, pistol caliber carbines, what we kind of saw was a huge, like the AR-15 market was crazy for like 8 years. And then there was just kind of a lot of redundancies of products that were coming out. And so I think some manufacturers were like, hey, let's make 9mm. It's about half the cost to shoot the ammo.
Mm-hmm.
It's low cost for the guns and then very low maintenance. But
Buy in bulk too because your handgun shoots it.
Yep. So you're getting to shoot the same ammo. But one of the other big things is a lot of ranges don't allow you to shoot centerfire rifles. We're very fortunate here in somewhat rural Wisconsin that any gun range around here would say, yeah, go ahead, shoot your 270 or whatever. If you're close to Cincinnati or Kansas City, a lot of, like around the country, doesn't matter. A lot of outdoor gun ranges don't allow you to shoot rifles, centerfire rifles. And most indoor ranges heavily limit centerfire rifles. And so that basically means that you can't shoot the most common cartridge that your AR-15 is chambered in, which is 223 or 5.56, right? So we started to see a huge influx of pistol caliber carbines coming from manufacturers in the last, I would say, 5 years. And probably about 4 years ago, I bought my first one when I started to hear that there were talks of bringing a carbine into USPSA shooting. And that happened. I think Jason Edwards and Mike Foley and some other guys decided that it would be a lot of fun. And you know what? We can add more people to the sport. And there's plenty of theatrics still right now and plenty of drama of guys saying that, because even though you have separate divisions and people really shouldn't look at like an overall winner of a league or a match, people do. And they look at, I just got beat by a guy and, he has this gun and, that's a rifle. It's way easier to shoot faster. And, I got third overall, but I should have got first. Even though they won their division, which is the people they were competing directly with, there still is a little bit of drama out there. But it has taken off in leaps and bounds. And now pistol caliber carbine is a way that indoor shooters in the winter or whenever, or at a range where you're limited to not shooting centerfire rifles, we can actually get out and practice fundamentals.
Are precision 22s like the long range version of pistol caliber carbines?
Yep.
Kind of same basic premise. You can still be precise and have a lot of the same fundamentals and the same same ergonomics to work with, but it's just to shoot a rimfire.
Oh, so it's kind of crazy because a lot of times PCCs will actually move around more than your centerfire rifle does because you don't have as much pressure in the cartridge to actuate a compensator that will negate recoil or mitigate recoil.
What do you mean move around?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
The guns can be a little bit
rowdier?
Sloshy. I don't know.
So
don't know what that means.
They rock a lot more.
Oh, okay.
But, there's a lot of companies that make really good PCCs that they've managed to limit the movement. But yeah, 5 years ago, a PCC off the shelf was like, I don't know. I don't really want to shoot this that much.
Really?
But they've
that seems like
I've got one. It took me 2 years to get running right. I have a whole scrap box of parts that didn't work.
They're finicky.
They can be really finicky. And, when you think about it, if it's an AR-9 or an AR-15 that's retrofitted to run 9mm, that gun was not designed to run 9mm. It was designed to run 223 or whatever rifle cartridge it was designed for. And so it's kind of a bandage, but everybody has ARs. And so it's kind of the direction that a lot of people went. Yeah. And if you're going to use it as practice for your AR, you want the ergonomics to be the same.
The mag buttons in the same place, safety's in the same place, all that. Bolt release and all that.
But there's a lot of manufacturers out there that got it tuned in. PWS and Therian and,
JP is what helped get mine running.
JP has some amazing parts as well as some amazing rifles. You got MBX and Limcat. There's a handful of them.
What's that one that you use that looks like a Mac 10?
That's a Therian, yep.
Right. So, okay. So you got PCC, and then like we were saying, too, there's like the precision 22 stuff as well, that if you're a long-range shooter, that's another go-around for the rules at some of those ranges.
Huge.
It's getting pretty big these days. Now, I don't know if that really applies so much to winter. Maybe it does. Well, I guess you could shoot it indoors.
Yeah. So reduced target sizes
Again, we're going back to
not just dry firing.
it's a game of
but
angles. It's a game of
Yes.
angles. Shorter distance, smaller target, very similar to longer distance, bigger target.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So shooting a precision rifle, a half MOA target at 600 yards is 3 inches. A half MOA target at 100 yards is about a half an inch. It's pretty darn hard to hit, no matter what kind of gun you're using. So a lot of the times you'll see the Precision 22 indoor leagues popping up. And
Really?
those are really cool. I know that we're
Shooting
talking
like
about.
aspirins?
Yep, we're talking about starting one here at the Vortex indoor range.
Oh, man. That sounds cool.
That does sound cool. I mean, you bring up some good stuff there, like depending on what type of range you have access to, or even just where you are geographically, right? I mean, we're fortunate here. We have a couple spots where we can shoot out to, relatively long distances, 1,000 yards, a couple spots where we can shoot beyond. But there's a lot of places or people just don't even have access to, 300 yards might be a long range for that area. So all of a sudden you take a Precision 22 and you start shooting small targets out to 300, maybe 400 yards. I don't know. That'd probably be the max distance I've ever even attempted to shoot,
Right.
a 22. You're doing all the same stuff and you don't need the vast landscape to set those targets out. And you don't have to walk as far to set those targets out either.
And going back a little bit to PCC, like one of the really cool things that doing PCC indoor, even outdoor PCC, but indoor at a pistol league, it allows us as shooters who are shooting 3-gun or action rifle or tactical shotgun or whatever, we get to work on our footwork, which is a huge part of the game, and it's a huge thing that you can lose fast. And so we're working on footwork indoors, even though it looks like we're shooting targets as fast as we can. Just like I see every sight picture and every shot that I shoot, I actually am visualizing my steps through a stage too.
Is that what you were doing?
Not just me, but what?
Is that what you were doing when I saw you watching Riverdance?
That was something else.
Oh, that was
You said you wouldn't
Footloose.
talk about it.
So, Ruben, he obviously enjoys the 3-gun side of things. He keeps bringing this back to, and USPSA, sorry. He keeps bringing this back to PCC, and I keep bringing it back to Precision 22s. You could do the same thing also with, loading the bipod on a Precision 22,
Yeah.
And getting in the proper prone position or whatever position is.
So
behind your-
much of shooting has to do with fundamentals.
with the set. Yeah.
It's your setup, it's your sight picture, it's your trigger press, but it's also about getting into certain positions. A big part of PRS isn't necessarily hitting a 6-inch target at 600 yards. It's doing it off of a barricade, or it's doing it off of, a chain that's hung between 2 posts, and you're halfway kneeling, but not quite kneeling because it's just a little too high. And so a lot of that is building a position and building that your support for the shot. And the shot is just the end result.
Yeah, realistically speaking, I mean, the amount of space you need to do everything that you can do in a shooting competition is however many square feet you take up with your rifle,
Exactly.
And Rube, you're doing this keto thing, so you're going to take up even less square feet
Gosh, I hope so.
soon. But, I mean, once the bullet leaves the end of the barrel, you can't do anything about it. Everything that you can do about it is at the gun.
Yeah,
Which,
exactly.
when you're indoors or wherever you are, you can work on that. Sorry, Rube, you gave me a face.
Dude, no. That's good. Now I'm held to it. People are going to be emailing me. It's gonna be
Right.
Crazy.
What else do you guys do in the wintertime? I wrote down 2 other things here, but I want to also hear what you guys brought to the table because I've got you reevaluate your gear, and then you also, I put one down, practicing milling targets too, utilizing, even if you got like a solo RT with a reticle in it,
Mill
practicing
snowman.
just milling anything, which essentially using the MRAD system or MOA system in order to determine an accurate range for something.
Do you want to mill a snowman?
What do you guys got? Or maybe you can speak to those reevaluating gear and practicing milling targets.
Rube and I both have 2 little girls, so Frozen jokes are always pretty funny.
Right,
Team
right.
Elsa.
Rube alluded to it a little bit. One of the things that I do specifically, and it wasn't my idea, I picked it up from a guy named Jerry, but I actually take the winter as a time to cross-train on a different gun. I will very specifically, after the quote-unquote last match of the year, put all the guns that I shoot all summer away, and I pick up a completely different one. I'll shoot a completely different class of pistol and work on applying myself to something different, something that maybe is a heavier shooting caliber. So instead of a 9mm, I go to a 45, something that carries less ammunition, so I have to reload more so I can work those fundamentals when I do get live fire reps. Just working on and then so you start shooting something that you have to reload a lot, recoils more, puts you back in touch with, well, did I get a little sloppy on my grip?
Yeah,
Dialing into sights.
Perfect example you said was reloading, right? So if we were talking about pistol shooting, and I'm used to my STI 2011 with a big old mag well, big funnel that sucks the mag right up in it. Might as well be a vacuum.
Mag vacuum.
Yeah, mag vac. Okay, and now
Is that trademarked?
not yet.
Oh. All right.
But
Note to self.
I just wrote it down. It's ours.
Okay.
so I shot this match a few years ago called the NRA World Shooting Championship, and that was sponsored by NRA Shooting Sports, and they wanted to kind of see who was one of the best all-around shooting athletes in the world. And so you had big names there like Greg Jordan and Jerry Michalik and the Yackleys, and there's all kinds of people out there that are very accomplished shooters. And some of them, were more focused on trap shooting. Some of them were more focused on PRS. Some of them were high power shooters. And they kind of wanted to see, like, where do the best all-around shooters come from? And really, like, a guy like Jerry Michalik is a perfect candidate for something like that, right? Because he's done revolver, he's done skeet shooting, he's done hunting, he's done 3-gun, he's done pistol, you name it. And so we were given stage guns to use. And so it was one morning was 3-gun and high power and skeet. And then the next day was 22 and cowboy action and bullseye. And so we were shooting stage guns. And
the interesting thing about those stage guns too is you really kind of lose your home court advantage.
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
all that
Yeah.
familiarity.
No,
Everybody knows what I'm talking about with the words.
Nailed it.
Familiarity.
All the family.
All the family you've been trying to build up, it's gone. Like, I mean, you get all that practice, which is going to apply to what you're doing, but some of those finer points, you're going to lose that.
So perfect example is they made an announcement, like, we're going to use FN long slide 9. So it was a FNS 9L or something like that for one of the pistol stages. So a bunch of us went out and, like, bought FNS long slide 9s to try and get familiar. And then we didn't actually even use that. It was a different gun. So, and it could be a different, I could have the facts a little bit mixed up, but it was something to that effect, right? And so reloading a handgun is something that we practice in our basements and we get familiar with it. And
That's the word.
Yes, exactly. And so now all of a sudden you have to reload a different pistol, and you're, like, looking at the mag well, and you're looking at your hand as you go down, and you're watching it go in every time, and then you press back into the target. You should be doing that every time with your own pistol, but it's not until you cross-train with a different platform until that you actually watch that happen.
Oh, because you're so far out of your comfort zone, you're
super deliberate,
you're super hyper focused.
Yes, but you should be doing that every time.
But you always
You should.
Dude, and that's why I think people say beginner's luck is a thing, because when you're a beginner, you're, like, hyper focused on.
Yeah.
You soak up everything everybody tells you.
Totally.
Absolutely.
And it's like, okay, they told me to do this. That's all I know. Is just do that. And then as soon as you get good at it, you're kind of like, I got this.
Yeah, it really.
That's interesting because I mean, it's kind of like, whatever in football, like wide receiver, they say, look that football in. And you see when some guys don't do it, they take their eyes off the ball.
Yeah.
You kind of but they're also, pros. I almost feel like there's, like, a compromise there. Like, in some ways, you, through all that practice with the stuff that you're used to using, you get some liberty to not have to look that in and maybe gain some speed out of that. I don't know. You guys can speak to that way better than I will.
Yeah,
I think
it's
it's
a big balance of speed versus slop. And you push it to the edge a lot of times.
And that's sacrilege for a lot of guys to do that on purpose. If we were to talk to some of our other Vortex team shooters, they shoot one pistol. That's
Don't
all
touch
they have.
another one.
They won't touch another one.
I've brought guns to the range before and been like, dude, you want to shoot my new pistol? And they're like, nope, get that away from me.
Take that thing
They
out of my
hold
sight.
the cross and the spike up and get that away from me. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
But I take it as a check.
No names.
It's a snapshot in time. Just kind of gives you it's a bit of a gut check.
Mhm.
To be like, okay, well, where am I at? Did I get sloppy on that one? Or when you get good with the gun that's harder to shoot, when you go back to the other one.
Sometimes, though, you find yourself being more deliberate. Like, there's a match next weekend that I'm probably not going to shoot my shotgun at. And I know that I will watch those magazine reloads go up in every time until it seats and I'll feel the click because I'm just not comfortable doing it by memory. So, yeah, I've had matches where I've switched a gun a week before and had some of the best performances ever for me.
Let's transition to long range guys too. We'll go back and forth, kind of like a. What do you think about those guys? Cross training and doing different things like that with different rifles, different triggers,
Yeah.
and different things like different bolt handles, different
Mount.
different
Mount. Change the comb on your stock a little bit.
I've
Yeah.
seen guys that really good example. Midwest dude named Tyler Payne, who shoots for the Army Marksmanship Unit now, one of the best PRS shooters in the country. He shoots PRS gas gun the whole year while he's also shooting PRS bolt gun matches. And I've seen people go like, I'm not focusing on this year. I'm just going to focus on bolt gun. And then it's like Tyler just won both series overall, right? Like this is last year, but you know what I mean? Like it proves that you can go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
But it all goes back to fundamentals. Mm-hmm. And more of it is in your mind than you think.
Yep, and feeling the gun. So knowing the gun
Mm-hmm.
and what it needs and how to get it to put the bullet where you want it to go.
Precisely. What else you guys got that you do in the winter? You do that Trekker match, Adam.
I do.
That's pretty cool.
That came out of it came out of a reality of the North here that eventually the ground freezes and we can't set targets into the dirt anymore because the nails won't go in. So we actually basically I based it off of a type of motorcycle racing, but it's basically a cross-country race with shooting where you run, like cross-country in high school, and then there's checkpoints where they do shooting.
People will actually run just running, not for any other purpose.
Yeah, it's weird. But, all of a sudden you get guys with guns and like, hey, well, we could do this in the winter and like it's cold so you won't sweat. I'm like, all right, we'll give that a try. Guys who would never run for any other reason. They'll put their tactical vest on and go out and
Just get after it.
Yeah.
Now, is this like
Sounds like a biathlon on your feet,
Yes. Yep.
not skis.
is it a circular track or is it like a cross country, like you'd be going through maybe trails or something like that?
The way I did it with the facility that we had access to, we basically set out a course that was about 3/4 of a mile, and then it was a circular loop, and then there were 4 checkpoints on that loop. The only way you could get points was to hit targets. You could only shoot at targets for a fixed amount of time. It was like, I believe it was like 30 seconds. Many targets you can shoot in 30
It's
seconds.
kind of like a pro-am, right?
Yep.
Where you have a ton of targets set up, and however many you knock down is however many you get. You don't necessarily get penalized for targets left standing.
Mm-hmm.
You just get credit for the ones you knocked over.
Yep.
Kind of like bowling.
And then we gave everybody 2 hours to do as many laps as they wanted. And then also we made the target point values descend from the beginning. So they're descending in value for about 5 points a target for the first 3 laps. And then all of a sudden they spike back up again at the end. So it was a bit of the competitors had a bit of a decision between tortoise and the hare. Were they going to try and get their hits early on when they were rested, when they really counted? Or were they just going to try and burn as many laps as they could? And then we added in that you have to carry everything that you want to use. So anything you want to use during that 2 hours, you have to carry with you. You have to start with. So then they also have
That's got to be a lot of ammo, right?
Yeah. So guys are carrying 300 rounds of rifle, 200 rounds of pistol, trying to and then some of us, the last time we were digging them out of the ground, like in USPSA and 3-gun, you have to unload, show clear. So a lot of guys will just rack the slide, let that bullet fall on the ground. Some guys were so low on ammo, they were like digging through the ground, like brushing up 9mm off the ground and putting it in their mags because they needed a couple more rounds to get through the next checkpoint.
That's wild.
That totally fits with the winter snowy theme, just kind of that apocalyptic feel where you're just
It's a lot of fun.
Well, it seems like, like you said, oftentimes it's cold outside. One of the reasons you don't want to go outside is because it's cold. I bet you warm up right away doing that.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And that that does sound
It's like the Vortex
interesting.
extreme of winter
It is,
shooting
yeah.
sports.
Yeah. And I bet, like you said, you start running around there a little bit. I bet that really introduces some interesting fatigue elements.
Fogging on glasses.
Fogging
Yes.
on glasses, heart rate.
Guns work differently. Oil properties are different in the winter. So some
that's
guns
right.
stop working. There's no jackets for sure. Those go right out the window. Packs, it was vests versus packs. Some guys were showing up with their tactical vests and a lot of like Eberly stock packs. So that was what I ended up using. I have an Eberly stock pack with the sheath in the back.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of theories on load bearing equipment and nutrition and water too. Like how much of that were you going to bring with you? And it was cool. There was a lot of strategy to it. And it's a really fun event.
It's pretty sweet.
I want to talk a little bit about gear selection because that is,
Yes.
a lot of times.
And then the last thing after that I want to talk about is predator hunting too.
Ooh, nice.
Gear selection first.
Yeah,
was a teaser.
I mean, just a
For the
short, just
Same
a
podcast we're already in.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're always trying to push the limits for speed. Like, it's a combination of speed and accuracy, but we're always looking for gear that's lighter, faster, stronger. Not quite to the point of your brother Dave, but, like, yeah, we're always...
Still pretty
No,
light.
he's just
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, my 6-pound rifle, I passed to him, and he goes, it's kind of heavy. But,
It's hard to be around him.
if he wasn't so nice...
Right. Yeah. I kind of wish he was a douche sometimes.
So,
Can
we're
I
always...
say that on the podcast? Dang it. The filter is gone.
I like it.
All right.
We're kind of trying to figure out what worked for us during the past season and what didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have gear that it just doesn't work, and so you're forced to make a mid-season change. Something breaks or something just doesn't feel right. But usually we're kind of leaving gear selection for the downtime.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of one thing that guys we've talked to. I've talked to guys like Nick Miller and Daniel Jurassic and some of our friends like Ryan Reed down in Texas, Arkansas, Florida, guys that are, if they make a change, like they probably have a match the next week. And so they don't have a whole lot of time to get used to equipment. Whereas if I change the shotgun shell caddies that I use or the pistol holster or magazines for a PCC or whatever, or an optic change, something new comes out and we want to switch to something new, I actually get a pretty good amount of time both dry firing and then testing new gear, which is a big part of the off season. And I actually do clean guns in the winter, so.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I don't like admitting it, but
Now, when you say clean a gun,
Yeah.
I don't
is it
follow.
like, can you? I don't
well, so Mark, what you would do is you disassemble it and use a cleaning agent and like a brass brush or something like that, maybe a rag. You would typically go down in the basement or in the garage and you would use those solutions to clean the powder fouling and stuff off of the firearm.
Interesting.
It's people
think it's-
say that it proves that it can increase function.
I think it's one of those. I think it's a fad.
I think if you're bored, you could.
Just let him.
I follow.
Just let him-
I adhere to a strict "it'll be fine" policy.
Just let him have it.
You guys are jerks.
Let's talk about predator hunting real quick, though. That's another thing you can do in the winter.
That's a good one for the winter.
That's a good way to, you're going to have to pull together all your marksmanship fundamentals
Yep.
to hit those little guys, because you're talking about coyote hunting. That happens in the winter. They ain't big,
No,
and they're usually on the move, and it's not a given.
I tell you what. I mean, that's one thing that really stood out to me. The first coyote when I finally killed one. This is several years ago, but I skinned it out, and then I realized why I was missing them all the darn time. Their chest cavity at their widest point is quite small. I mean, you're looking. I guess I've never taped one out, but you're probably looking at about 6 inches, maybe
Yeah,
6 to 8. I don't know.
Before I ever actually saw one, I always thought they were the size of like huskies.
Yeah.
They're not.
With the fur on, they are. I'm sure,
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of guys that are cutting fur out there. But, small targets. They're fast. They're oftentimes coming in hot. We're talking about 3-gun here with multiple, using multiple firearms. I mean, I know a lot of guys that, they carry a shotgun and an AR, a shotgun and a bolt gun. You get a dog that's burning in hot and coming in tight. That shotgun is pretty darn handy to have. Doubles,
It really, really tests your cognition and your ability to observe what's happening, create a solution for it, and execute that solution, right? So if you
With
have
an elevated heart rate.
totally, and it's cold. So, but yeah, I mean, perfect situation. You're calling, dog comes in, peeks over the hill at 540. Number one, you don't know it's 540, so you got to range it. Number two, you got to grab your gun, check if it's first focal plane or second focal plane, figure out your drop for that distance, make a shot, right? And so there's a lot that goes into it.
if the dog hasn't moved already.
Yes, and it can be a huge training aid for shooters, whether it be military, law enforcement, professional, whether it be competitive shooter. It's so good for you.
My 3-gun rifle is my coyote rifle. Like, add suppressor, and that's it. Guys call in on the phone, like, what's a good coyote hunting scope? Like, Razor 1.6. That's
Right.
what I tell them.
Strike fuel 1 to 8 doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Is that an
Yeah.
18-inch or is that your SBR?
SBR.
SBR? Right
I'm
on.
about that shorty life.
All about that. Now, predator hunting happens pretty much year-round, but a lot of people do the coyote hunting, especially in the winter, because...
I mean, I like to do it in the winter because their hides are good.
Right.
You
Okay.
know, and that's
And you can see them.
and you can see them, and it's something that when you get into like the fall, right, or even August through even August through December, or even there's hunts that big game hunts that are outside of that or other.
And it's way
Other
more exciting
seasons.
than the NBA.
Well, there's that too, but it's something you can kind of fill that downtime winter void with. That you
Yeah.
encounter sometimes with the shooting sport or
Hunt year round.
hunt
And-
year round.
And
Right, you're right.
as a training aid, the season or lack thereof is long enough, and the bag limit or lack thereof is big enough that you can do it a lot.
Mhm.
I mean, you could call deer hunting a training aid, but like you only get a couple tags.
Right.
Whereas dog crews, what are they, 20, 40 a
Yeah.
season, if they're
Powder
really getting
hounds,
after
man.
it. So,
Dude, if you look at some dudes out west, like there's
Steve,
a
is
guy,
that you?
absolute warlocks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's guys that I follow out west that are, they'll have 200 plus dogs in a season, and they're
Yeah.
probably in areas that they have a little more access to hunting them, or they have land that they've locked down for hunting coyotes for years and years. But yeah, there are guys that absolutely get on it.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about your 3-gun rifle being a good coyote gun, man. You'd be hard pressed to beat an AR for coyote hunting. I mean, they're super fast. They're way accurate nowadays.
the barrels,
Mhm.
barrels that come on a lot of ARs now are way better than what you're buying on an off the shelf deer, bolt action rifle.
Right. I mean, your follow up shots. I mean, oftentimes, you're calling in multiple dogs. The first one, you might get a standing shot, but I doubt you're going to get a standing shot on the second one. So you're
Yeah.
We talked to Anthony Amatine. He's a big-time coyote hunter. He uses ARs most of the time. You go to his page, A.Amatine, you'll see a lot of dead dogs and pigs.
TX killer.
TX killer.
Yeah, the AR is, and I went to Texas and hog hunted this spring, did some coyote hunting, went out to Wyoming, did some prairie dog hunting, did coyote hunting back here, obviously compete with it. The AR is it's such a adaptive and unique modular platform that you can do like anything with.
mm-hmm.
That it is.
Well, and Adam brought up something using also as 1 to 6. And I think a lot of people, I think for some reason with predator hunting, it's kind of gotten into people's heads that you need an ultra long range scope. And I think there's definitely a lot of scenarios where that can be handy. But I think in most scenarios, you could probably get by with a nice either mid range scope, something in that 3 to 15, 4 to 16 range.
10.
Particularly because the versatility or the variety of shots, particularly if you're only going to carry the one firearm, can be, 3 feet or 300 yards,
yeah.
So.
Well, and it's funny that I just brought up Anthony too, Amatine, because in our podcast with him, is one of the first podcasts we did, I was asking him about, he uses the Razor 1 to 6 and the PST Gen 2 1 to 6. I asked him what power he uses it on most of the time. 1.
Yeah.
He said he almost never bumps it up from 1. And that's out to like 300. He just, that's where he keeps it.
Like on the sales side, a lot of times guys are calling in, and we're usually talking them down a size of scope. They're like, "Oh, I'm thinking at that 6 to 24. Like, well, how about that 4 to 16? Or for deer hunting scope. Well, I want that 4 to 16. In case I have to shoot 300 yards. Well, maybe that 2.5 to 10 would probably be a better idea for you. We went prairie dog hunting in Wyoming this summer, and most guys call in. They think they need the really powerful scopes but we were shooting prairie dogs with 1 to 6s and 2 to 10s.
I shot 4 rounds out of Virgil's gun with a 2 to 10 PST Gen 2, and I shot 2 rounds out of the 6.5 Creedmoor with a 5 to 25 Gen 2, and I think I shot 1,500 rounds with my AR.
Yeah, and I was 1,500 rounds through a 2 to 10 on an AR. So
Hold on, and you were using 1 to 6s, you said? And 2 to 10?
Yep,
I
1
have
to
one.
6s,
On prairie
2 to
dogs?
10s. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my farthest.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Fake news. I'm just,
It's on the gram. It's cool.
I'm kidding.
I
Yeah,
believe you,
I
Brendan.
got video, whatever.
Yeah.
I know they're dead.
No, it's cool. Fantastic. Well, what do you say? I think we talked about some really great things that people can use in the winter. How about we go into a quick round of last calls?
Cool.
My last call will be check out keto. Root's
enough.
doing it. Meat and veggies. What's wrong with that?
Nothing wrong with that. That's just clean living.
You know, I say that though, and I'm about to slam a burrito tonight with rice and beans and a tortilla and chips. I would never give that
Oh,
up.
I hate you.
Check out keto though.
Hey, no, it's good for you though.
my last call, have a plan going into off season, whether you be down south and you don't shoot as much in the summer because of the heat and you shoot more in the winter. Have a plan going into your off season. If you're up north, figure out some ways that you can stay sharp. But the middle of December, early January is going to sneak up on you, and you're not going to have any ammo reloaded for the next year. That's another thing we do is reload ammo.
Ooh,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We have a podcast on that.
Yep. Check them out. But before you know it, you're going to be back into the next season. You're going to have all your gear. It's all still dirty. Your guns haven't been cleaned. Mark. And if you don't know what you're going to do, and then have a plan for dry firing. If you don't know what you're going to do, it's going to sneak past, and you're going to go into the next season either behind where you ended last year or on the same par. And you want to use that off season to get better.
Yep. I'd say my last call is, I'm going to let Adam go last because I think his is going to be better than mine. But
I'm still trying to figure out what last call is, so
We do a thing called last call, and yeah,
just kind of like
out.
just a wrap up, thought.
follow your
I'm
heart.
just stalling.
Follow your
I'll,
heart.
I'll give you some time. Jim, we're sitting with some pretty serious shooters right here.
Yes.
Some guys that are next level. They shoot a ton, a variety of different competition style events, disciplines. I'm not that guy, but a lot of what we've talked about here, I think, applies to everybody at some level. And we hit on this early on, but just the familiarity. There we go again with your equipment is a big deal. Do some dry fire, get more familiar with that trigger, get more familiar with your equipment, the way the gun feels.
And for some people, like some people who just they let the gun sit in the safe all year and then they pull it out once a year. I can't think of any time that would ever happen. But if that did ever happen, make sure your gun works.
That's a good idea too.
That helps. Like I said, I can't think of why anybody would ever do that, but make sure your gun works.
My last call would be try something new. Try something new technique-wise, equipment-wise to push yourself forward. Or if you're pretty established in whatever sport you're doing, it's still fun. Like, try something different, change it up, keep it fresh. There's lots of fun guns to shoot out there. You don't just have to stick to one. So try something new technique-wise or change up. If you do have access to some shooting in the winter, try something a little bit different to push your boundaries out a little bit.
My second last call is that Mark should build his AR.
Oh, I second that second last call.
That's really where this has gone, huh?
Yep.
You know what? I'm gonna do it just to spite you guys.
They cycle themselves.
I don't think you will.
You don't have to turn it.
Yeah. And you can use that.
Let's shoot all week.
My new rifle only has like a 40-degree bolt throw on it. 40,
Yeah, but
60.
it's like chemistry and
that's
stuff.
like not
Like
even that much turning.
I don't even,
It's practically an autoloader.
It's not, though.
but it's not because you still have to do something.
Oh, and the other thing is, even for hunters, dry fire your deer hunting rifle.
Oh, exactly.
I cannot count. I cannot tell you how many times a customer has brought a gun in, and I've said, "Hey, can I dry fire it? Can I check it out and make sure it's empty and check it out?" And it's like, "Oh man, that's a pretty heavy trigger," and you can get used to a heavy trigger if you dry fire it.
Yeah. I thought you were about to bring up the fact how some of them come in and their guns are loaded.
No,
And then we find out when we ask, hey, can we dry fire it? And we open it up and, oh, that wouldn't have been a dry fire. That would have been a very wet fire.
When I worked retail, we actually had a pickle jar full of ammo that we took out of guns that came into the store.
It's like a swear jar, but even worse.
That's a good thing going back to fundamentals. Go back to those basic safety fundamentals every time,
Yes.
particularly when you're with people who you might not know.
Yes. Well, I think we nailed it on that one. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hopefully, you guys all this winter could take some information from this and put it towards becoming an even better shooter. Surprise everybody out there on the range and the competition. When you come out and you're even better after the winter, they're going to wonder what the heck you did. They're going to want to know what Rex Kwon Do you took, what dojo you went to, and you can tell them it was a Vortex Nation podcast. All right. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. That's all we got.
Bye.
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 All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. leave us a review or comment down below. We want to hear what you have to say about the show, maybe what you like, maybe what you didn't like, so that way we can make these podcasts as good as they can be. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'll be posting about each episode released, so that way you can go back, find these things, maybe grab a little nugget of information that you can take with you to the range, out in the field, or maybe to the kitchen if we're talking about some good food. So, again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.